Hello everyone, welcome back. Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel we're going to talk about favorite one-off albums. I've chosen about a dozen or so. I'm going to start it off here with a fine album from 1973, an album that has never been reissued or released in 50 plus years for some odd reason, maybe legality issues, who knows. But I'm talking about 1973's Buckingham Nicks album. A fine album. Just listening to it this morning. It's one of those albums where there's like a Buckingham song, then there's a Nicks song. They trade off song to song, and at the end they have this long song where they both collaborate on and sing. So on this particular album, you have an early version of the song Crystal. The song Crystal was featured on the self-titled Fleetwood Mac album of 1975, which they first appeared on. So we get an early version of that. We get a very early example of Lindsey Buckingham's unique guitar style on tracks like Without a Leg to Stand On, Don't Let Me Down Again. There's some really cool Stevie Nicks songs on here. And by the way, her voice isn't like a sheep in heat like it later became. It's more controlled. She's not pushing her voice. Some really fine material like Long Distance Winter by Nicks, Crying in the Night, and of course Crystal. Here's the inside of the album. This is an old copy I've had for years. It was originally released on Polydor Records, and this is the album that turned Mick Fleetwood on to asking them to join the band in 1975. So I don't know why it hasn't been re-released. It really is a cool record, and there's some definite great material on here, and I think it's a great listen. So if you pull it up online, check it out, and give it a listen. Buckingham Nicks, 1973. Another great one-off record. And, maybe the name has stuck throughout the decades, Jonathan Richman, but the first album, The Modern Lovers, is definitely a one-off. Jonathan Richman never made another record like this. After this record, he would become more involved with kind of children-like whimsy in his songs. I love that stuff too. Abominable Snowman in the Market, New England, such and such. But this album here is just an absolute predecessor of the new wave punk movement, recorded in '71, produced by John Cale. Just classic after classic song on here. Roadrunner, Astral Plane, Old World, Pablo Picasso, I'm Straight, Dignified and Old, all just on side one. In side two, you've got She Cracked, followed by Hospital, Someone I Care About, Girlfriend, Modern World, and it ends with Government Center. Most of the tracks, I believe, were recorded in '71, and then a few were tacked on for the '76 release. At this point in the band, you have Jonathan Richman, lead vocals, guitar. You have Jerry Harrison, who would later go on to the Talking Heads. You've got David Robinson, who would go on to the Cars. I don't remember what happened to Ernie Brooks, but this is a great one-off record here, released in 1976. And again, after this, Jonathan Richman would go into more of a childlike whimsy on most of his records and create all these really naive type records. And those are worth seeking out as well. But this is the winner here, and definite one-off. The Modern Lovers. If you want to hear a really good, just unsung, underground record by an incredible singer-songwriter, I tried to look for information on this particular artist online, and there was nothing that came up. But I remember hearing this album when I was about 8 years old. My brother and sister played it a lot. And apparently this guy opened up for Joni Mitchell at the Troubadour back in '73. And the guy's name is Steve Ferguson. This is his only album. And again, I can't find any information about this guy online. But I do know that this album is stellar. I was playing again this morning. And there's a track on here that should have been a huge hit. It's the second track on the album called Charlemagne. Really, really great, catchy little track. His voice and his music kind of reminds me of Randy Newman a little bit, that kind of droll delivery, and just the whole aesthetic of the whole presentation, should I say. But if you ever see this in a used bin, or I think you could actually pull it up online and hear it, check it out. It's really, really good. Guy's name is Steve Ferguson. It was originally released on Asylum Records. I believe he was one of the first batch of singer-songwriters that David Geffen signed to the Asylum Records imprint back in 73, 72. But yeah, Steve Ferguson, great one-off record. Another great one-off record. We never saw another record by this band again. I loved this record when it came out, and I bought the cassette. It's The Laws, and the lead singer is Lee Mavers. I think he turned into kind of a recluse, but the huge hit on here, There She Goes, was made a big impact on KROQ and alternative radio back in 1990. And I think a few other people have covered it and made a big hit out of it. But there's just an array of great tracks on here. It starts off with Son of a Gun, I Can't Sleep, Timeless Melody. Of course, There She Goes, Doldrum. Side 2 has some really great tracks, Feelin', Way Out, IOU. Very Hollies sounding, very retro sounding. That song, There She Goes, always reminded me of the Hollies. But yeah, another great one-off record here from 1990, The Laws. And I don't know what happened to them afterwards. I think, like I said, Lee Mavers just kind of went into exile. So anyway, that's that one. And then, of course, I got to mention this one. This guy, this particular artist could have really gone on to some amazing things. The guy had just talent up the yin yang. I mean, he came from a talented father, and unfortunately, his father lost his life, and then, of course, he would lose his life in the Mississippi River while waiting to record his second album. I'm talking about Jeff Buckley. A great one-off record. What an amazing talent. That voice. He does so many different styles on this record. Starting off with the track Mojo Pin. Already you know what kind of record this is going to be. This is not your usual singer-songwriter album. Goes into Grace, Last Goodbye, Lie Like a Wine. So Real is one of my favorite tracks on here. He goes into these octaves with his voice that are out of reach. I don't know how he does it. It's just incredible. And then, of course, probably the definitive version of Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen is on here. And he does such an amazing version. But every track on here is just magnificently produced. His playing is beautiful. His voice is beautiful, especially on Corpus Christi Carol. Incredible stuff. And he was getting ready to release this album right here, or work on this album. This is kind of a posthumous release. Sketches for My Sweetheart the Drunk. And they were getting ready to record in Mississippi. He went out for a swim and he drowned. And he was only like 32 years old, or 30 or 32, but such a loss, such a loss. This guy could have created so many great albums, but we have this album, we have Grace, and yeah, what a shame, what a shame. Another great album from 1980. This is a one-off between Dave Edmunds, guitarist Dave Edmunds, and Nick Lowe, and the group is called Rockpile. And even on this American version, they even show the touring schedule for the fall of 1980 on the back here. All the different places they're playing. Really odd to put on an album. But there was a track on here that got a lot of airplay called Teacher Teacher. Another great one called When I Write the Book. And it's just a fun listen. Like kind of rockabilly, pop, kind of early 60s pop. And definitely worth seeking out if you haven't heard it. I'm a big fan of Nick Lowe and Elvis Costello. And this all kind of ties in with that kind of music. And it's called Seconds of Pleasure by Rockpile from 1980. Another one I really like. This really is a divisive record. Some people love this record, some people hate it. It was a one-off by the amazing Skip Spence from Moby Grape. Of course, Moby Grape had a lot of issues in their short career. But for some reason, this guy was able to get it together. He had a lot of issues, a lot of mental issues. He went into the recording studio. I don't know where it was. Laid down all the tracks, bass, drums, guitars, vocals. This is a psychedelic classic right here. It's called Ore by Skip Spence. And it starts off with this incredible track called Little Hands. And yes, the vocals are weird and wobbly and everything, but I'm sure he was a little weird and wobbly at the time. But nothing really sounds quite like this record. It's quite a headphone listen. If you've never heard it, you should check it out. Also, check out that first Moby Grape album. It sounds totally different than this. That's a real, solid record. This is more of a headspace kind of listen. But he plays all the instruments, and all the tracks are really, really great. They're really great. I love this record, and it was a one-off. And after this, he would just kind of fall apart and never recover. unfortunately. Skip Spence or... Here's a one-off performance that is really cool. It's a performance between Lou Reed, John Cale, and Nico from, it's called La Bataclan 72. And the tapes are slowed down a little bit. I don't know what the deal is with the transfer of the tapes. I think they've been reproduced and recreated better now. You can buy different versions of this, better versions, but it's really interesting to hear at this point, Nico, Lou Reed, and John Cale. And they do a lot of Velvet Underground songs, Waiting for the Man. Lou Reed even does a version of Berlin on here. Black Angel's Death Song. He does Wild Child from his first solo album, Lou Reed. And of course, you've got a couple of tracks on here that Nico sings, those banana songs, I'll Be Your Mirror, Femme Fatale. Really interesting listen. Ends with All Tomorrow's Parties. There's something very eerie and creepy about this recording, but I dig it. I'd like to find the corrected version, though, that's not so slow as this one. But check it out. La Bataclan 72 live. There's a band that came out in the mid-90s. I saw this band open for the Smithereens. I also saw them one time at the Troubadour in LA. And it features Jason Faulkner, who was formerly with Jellyfish, and a guy named John Bryan, who's been all over the map in LA producing bands. He produced Amy Mann for a while. He's done a lot of different things. And they had this one album out that was really amazing called The Grays. Great power pop record. It's like a mixture of Todd Rundgren, a little bit of Zombies maybe, a little bit of Big Star. The first track really reminds me of Todd Rundgren. It's called Very Best Years. Another wonderful track on here is called Friend of Mine. Really cool guitar solo. Yeah, this is I don't know if you could even find this anymore, but pull it up online, check it out. It's really cool. The Grays, it's called. One album, one off, and they were done. So, and then another one I've mentioned several times on the channel. I'll mention it again from 1970. A definite one-off here. Thunderclap Newman's Hollywood Dream. You got Speedy King on lead vocals. He would partially write the song Armenia City in the Sky with The Who on the Who Sellout album. You got Jimmy McCulloch right here, who would later join Wings with Paul McCartney. They had a huge hit with Something in the Air, that song from 1970, which Tom Petty would later record, put on his Greatest Hits album. But there's just an array of great tracks on here. There's a song called Open the Door, Homer, a Basement Tapes track that Dylan wrote that they recorded here. Other great tracks like Wild Country. One of my favorites on here is called Reason, The Reason. There's barely a bad track on here, and it's really an interesting album of great pop from 1970. Thunderclap Newman from 1970. Another great one, too, is, I've mentioned this one several times. I'll mention it again. It's the collaboration of Iggy Pop and James Williamson. The album's called Kill City. If I had to pick my favorite Iggy Pop album, it wouldn't be Lust for Life or The Idiot, though I like those albums. I dig Kill City. This album rocks. This is the first thing that Iggy did after Raw Power. He was not in good shape at this point. I think he was had a stint in a mental hospital, and he had to be released to record portions of this album. But I love James Williamson's guitar on this. It's a little more, way more cleaner than Raw Power. A little more Stonesy, should we say. Starts off with Kill City. Joanna is a great track. There's a song called Consolation Prizes. It should have been a huge hit in a different world, right? But I love this album. I play this album all the time. It's just a great listen all the way through. Kill City, released in 1977, but recorded in 75. And then, of course, we got to throw this in. This is a great one-off, of course. Never mind the Bullocks for the Sex Pistols. Their whole career was based on this one record. This one record. I mean, there aren't many artists you could say that about, at least in pop, where one particular album is pretty much their entire career, and they fed off this their entire career. But again, this album still really packs a punch after all these years. Released in 1977. I mean, this is not an album for me to listen to when I'm in traffic. I'll freak out. But when I'm in a particular mood, nothing really satisfies like this album. I mean, it's so angry. It's just so balls to the wall and just, oh, you know what I mean? Pretty Vacant, Liar, No Feelings, 17. Always love Submission. It's like the only song that's kind of resembles a ballad. It has that reggae beat. And of course, God Save the Queen, probably my favorite Pistols track. And Bodies and No Feelings. Yes, a one-off indeed. And then one last one. I always love this collaboration between Stevie Ray Vaughan and his brother. The album called Family Style, released a month after Stevie Ray Vaughan's death. Has a really moving song on here called, what is it? Time's Ticking Away. TikTok, great track. Telephone Song. Maybe not as strong as some of Stevie Ray Vaughan's solo albums, but I think there's some really great moments on here, really charming stuff. So this is called Family Style by Stevie Ray Vaughan and his brother Jimmy. And those are about a dozen one-offs. There are plenty out there to choose from. These are ones I just thought off the top of my head that I really dig. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Put your selections in there. If you haven't done so already, please press that subscribe button. And we will see you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.